Today I'll present a possible Sasquatch footprint, its investigation, and how we casted it for posterity's sake. Make sure you stay around to the end of the video for some bonus footage you're probably not going to want to miss. Now let's hit the trail and get squatching. Hello fellow squatchers, this is Padre de Citron with my Sasquatch investigations. In November of 2021, while on expedition in Kentucky, one of the team members came across a footprint which we suspected to be a potential Sasquatch. Traveling a couple miles into the forest by ATVs, our host guided us to a waterfall. We had just gotten out to examine that when one of the members, Randy, this is Randy here, said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" That's when we all gathered around and came to the consensus that, yep, it was probably worth casting.
Found a print. And it's got a pretty good heel here, and looks like some pressure from the toes right there. That looks like it went between toes.
Nice. We'll give her a cast, and you got a little souvenir.
Yeah.
So before we added the casting material, Randy cleared out the leaves and other debris that were in the bottom of the footprint. We then took some overhead pictures with a tape measure so that we could use it for collecting data later. The overall length was 14 inches. The width was 7 inches. And then the width of the heel was 5 inches, though this picture unfortunately is blurry. I guess you can't win them all. Nonetheless, we mixed plaster of Paris with water in a large gallon-sized Ziploc bag that we had in the kit, and we prepped it for use on the footprint. When the mixture was ready, Randy poured it into the footprint, and we barely had enough to cover the whole footprint, but we made it work.
Look at this, is a good one. It's got the edge. It's got the whole edge, the whole thing.
Beauty.
Just right him out.
My dad.
There might be a clump, so try not to get that in there. Yeah, I didn't do it good enough. Is that a clump? We can always add more water. We marked the trail and set off on other adventures while we gave this a couple days to cure. Now, while that's happening, let me take you to a really unique analysis of this footprint. So this is a 3D image scan of the footprint, and special thanks goes out to John, who was a fellow expeditioner. He took out his iPhone with special software and scanned the whole footprint. This was after we had cleared some of the leaves and were prepping to do the casting. I'll do a few views like this straight overhead, and then I'll put it into an oblique mode where we'll really have some fun looking at some of the features that I wanted to point out to you. Bring it a little bit closer so you can begin to see some of the detailing. So if we begin to manipulate this 3D image and bring it down into somewhat of an oblique view, I'd like to point out a few characteristics of this footprint that lend credence to the potential that this was not a man's footprint, but potentially a possible Sasquatch footprint. But first, let me outline a little bit about the terrain. First of all, this footprint was on a slight incline of about 15 to 25 degrees, leading away from a water runoff that would have been back in this area. About 30 feet this way was a rock waterfall. So this area in itself is usually pretty wet, which allowed it to have this sort of a structure, giving this good solid footprint. And you can see that there's a couple layers here. There's this organic matter of decayed substance, and then it gets down into this area, which is more of a clay substance. But the water would have been this area, and this would have been the incline of anywhere between 15 to 25 degrees in my estimation. So on the three main characteristics that I wanted to point out, I want to start with the heel. You can see that there's a well-defined heel print, and it looks as if it might have taken quite a bit of the load as it impacted in this area. And a predominant heel strike is one that's been defined by Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum as one of the characteristics of a potential Sasquatch footprint. A large impact with the weight being borne on the outside of the foot and then coming back in towards the large toe in this region. And I will put the reference to that lecture in the video description. But most importantly, he has been pretty paramount as identifying something that is indicative of a Sasquatch or Bigfoot footprint, in that he talks about something called a mid-tarsal pressure ridge, specifically because there is the thought that the Sasquatch foot has a mid-tarsal break, allowing it to be more flexible and receive the ground better versus a fixed arch for the human foot. And that structure can be found here. So we're defining that as the mid-tarsal pressure ridge. And if I change this a little bit, you can see that it's being described by Dr. Jeff Meldrum in his lecture as when the weight is initiated here, goes to the outside of the foot, and then back into the great toe, the underlying material is pushed backwards, making this pressure ridge because the material has then butted up against that as the foot goes into kind of an inverted arch. And humans don't have this because of our fixed arch. When we go into toe off, the heel and the midfoot come off together and does not result in pushing some of this material backwards, ending up in this mid-tarsal pressure ridge. This up and angle it a little bit so that we can highlight that a little. You can see that from the inside of the arch where you have this mid-tarsal pressure ridge, and the thought is that this area here would have been the great toe with a little bit of a split into this and the rest of the toes being over here. If I angle that down a little bit, and I want to bring it in a little bit more, so bear with me here. Unfortunately, I think that through erosion, this portion here has was probably a hood from a cavernous void where the big toe went. I believe that this portion has fallen down. So unfortunately, at the time that we found this footprint, that void was not there, and we weren't able to capture that great toe. But if I bring it up again and bring it out, you can somewhat see again the outline of the small toes here with a little bit of a increased upward mass, and then the potential great toe being divergent from the others, going into the mid-tarsal pressure ridge and into the predominant heel strike. So in all fairness, this surely looks like a footprint versus just general weather erosion. And the big question is, does it reflect some of the mechanics as presented by Dr. Jeff Meldrum, or are we just trying to lead into and seeing things with rose-colored glasses by wearing rose-colored glasses? Is this a divergent great toe, or is it a genetic anomaly from that potential family or group of beings? Or is it a method to grip and get traction with the great toe because it's more flexible? Maybe that's normal biomechanics for this type of creature. Or maybe there was some sort of an injury that caused a missing toe or something like that. But again, as you can see, and I'll kind of play around with it a little bit here so you can really appreciate the 3D imagery. This is a really neat find. You can just kind of see the depth as we begin to move around at an oblique view. You can see the depth of how things were compressed and put in there. And it was just a really fun find. So let's just say that this is a Sasquatch footprint. I want to go back to some of the markings that were on the picture of the measurement. And as you recall, the one picture showing the length of the foot is listed at 14 inches. The front foot width I had at 7 inches, and even though the picture was very blurry, unfortunately, the heel appeared to be 5 inches. Now keep in mind, this is a measurement of how the foot deformed the earth, and the presumption is that there may be either excessive width or length because the foot actually fell into that footprint into the ground, and it might not exactly be those measurements. But if we play with these measurements and use a formula that has been championed by one of the local investigators here in Michigan by the name of Val, this individual has a lifelong involvement with detective work, and as he has been to different scenes and so forth, they have formulas that they've come up with in tracking primates in general. And if we apply some of those to this, we can come up with potential size and potential weight for this creature, though this is all just postulation, as I've said before. So the formula that Val has expressed is the height would be foot length times a constant number of 6.5. So if the foot length is 14 inches, we would multiply 14 by 6.5, which gives us 91 inches, which when you divide that, of course, by 12, that makes it 7 foot 7 inches in height. Now the formula for weight is a little less specific, and that formula is defined as the area of the foot times a constant of 7.5. And one way to extrapolate the area of a foot is by taking the length times 40%, meaning that the width is approximately 40% of the length. Now what I did is I actually divided this footprint into a front 1/3 and then a back 2/3 and did the math, and it actually came out to be very close to this 0.4 or 40% formula. So you can use the formula for the area being 40% of the length gives you the square inches of that footprint. And so when we did that for this footprint, I came up with 78.4 square inches of footprint times the constant of 7.5. And that comes out to being approximately 588 pounds. So what we have potentially represented here is a 7 foot 7 inch 588 pound being. That could be a juvenile, it could be a female, it could be a small male. Either way, if this was truly a Sasquatch footprint, I'm not sure that I would want to meet this individual in the woods. But who am I kidding? Of course I would. So my wishes almost came true, but that's a story for the bonus footage at the end of this video. So after we allowed the cast to cure for about 2 days, we went to harvest it. And unfortunately, Randy, who had found the footprint, had to leave the expedition early, so I went back alone. And here's the account of that.
So we're back 2 days later. The goal is to try to dig a trench around the foot and bring some of the underneath soil and let it cure inside for another couple weeks, wrapping newspaper around it to try to slowly absorb some of the water. I don't have a plastic bag large enough, so I'm going to do 2 bags end to end. I'm going to try to set this up by myself. Smart, I know, but I'm back here by myself. I'm going to try to set this up so that it will show some decent action, but I don't know if I can get that done. Maybe I'm going to have to set it up like here and just let it run. All right, that looks like it's going to work. So again, my intention is to kind of dig a trench around it. I'm going about an inch. Unfortunately, it is super wet. I'm glad we let it cure. Note to self, I don't know that I had enough plaster of Paris with it, but it is super soggy here, so I don't know if this actually had been run over by more water in the past 2 days or not, but here we go. How about this? Sabe, if you want me to have this, will it to happen, and we'll take it out. If not, I understand. Yeah, we've already got a fracture in the middle.
it's already fracturing. Man, yeah, I guess it was just too... Well, maybe it was intended that way. You know, Saba, you do have a sense of humor. So you probably want me to have it, but you know I'm traveling, so. Well, let's see. This is the kicker. You want to get that footprint, that toe mark. Well, it's very thin, that's why it broke. Note to self, bring much more plaster next time. That was a big, deep footprint though. I mean, we were probably, it was in muck, and it was probably a good 1.5 inches, maybe almost 2 in. And so, there we go. All right. So I'm going to end up carrying this. And
I'm not going to put it in the bag, my shoulder bag. I'm just going to carry it. All right, so here's the, coming from the north, I believe, if my bearings are straight. And as we come down, there's the stream, there's a waterfall. I'm not going to walk over there since I'm alone, because it could be, we were there the other day and it's just quite a drop off. But the footprint was right there. I should have done this video maybe before, but so the thought is that if you came down this path, crossed, went to step up, we've got a little bit of an incline, and so that left, or the right, the toe on the great toe on the right foot dug in, and that's what we really wanted you to see.
As promised, I have some bonus footage, and it is actually an account or a story of things that had happened to me the day that I went down to harvest the footprint. On the morning of the last day of the expedition, I had taken my time breaking down camp, allowing everyone to just do their own thing, and I was waiting for Randy to swing by in his ATV so that we could zip down, get the cast, and come back, and then pack up and make our way back to our respective states. However, it wasn't until almost everyone had packed up and left that I realized Randy was nowhere to be found. And unbeknownst to me, he had left early in the morning for an unexpected reason. And so that left me and harvesting the cast by myself. Now, because I had spent 3 days in the area, I knew the trail very well and had no concerns going back on my own. However, one of the basic rules in hiking in general is not to go alone, or at least let people know where you're going and when you're expected to return. As luck would have it, there were about 3 people left. The main organizer was there, and so I let them know that I had to go back and get the casted footprint. It was about 1.25 miles back in, so I told them by the time I walked in, I harvested it and walked back, it was going to be about an hour and 15 maybe, and I wanted to make sure that they were going to be around. They indicated they would, so I set off on my merry way. It was a beautiful Sunday morning with the sun shining, though it was somewhat brisk. And as I got about 1/4 mile in, I guess my mind started to get the best of me. And I started to think, well, you know, what if I'm being watched? What if I'm being followed? You know, there had been some activity in this area reported recently. And, you know, I did find the Bigfoot print, presumably. So I opened my arms as I'm walking, and I just spoke to the forest and said, I'm just here to gather proof of your existence. So please allow me to enjoy your, forest home. And as soon as I did that, a raven in a tree that was probably about 30 feet in front of me flew into the trail and then up and out and over the trees, making no sounds other than its wings flapping. Now, for those of you that don't know, it's been postulated that ravens and crows have a good relationship with the Bigfoot, and that they are their eyes and ears and potentially their messengers. I didn't think anything of that until something else occurred, probably about another quarter mile after that. This is where I came upon a portion of the trail called the Turkey Foot, and this is where there was a divergence of 3 different pathways. The main one that I was on, one to the right, and then one to the left. And my trail would have kept going straight through, but right when I was in that clearing, overhead was a single crow, this time, not a raven, a single crow, and it cawed twice, caw, caw. And I started to think, what if it was signaling the way that I was going as number 2? The right was number 1, the middle was number 2, and the third was number 3. So it started to build on me a little bit about, what might be happening here, that maybe I was being tracked or watched by, the animals of the forest. But nonetheless, I kept going, knowing that I had to get down there and get back. And this was actually an extra hour of time that I had not expected. I figured that I would have been able to get down and back quickly in the ATV, but maybe there was a purpose for this. So anyway, I get to the site, and just as I am getting ready to take off my shoulder bag, I heard a buck snort, and it was 5 repetitive buck snorts. I'm not going to reproduce those, but it was 5 of them in a row. And that was up and over a slight hill where it would have been in the direction of where the footprint would have been going. And that was not an area that I had investigated before, but that really, really startled me. So I took the bag off. I stopped. Of course, I looked in that direction. And then once again, I verbally said, I am just here to get this footprint. As soon as I'm done, I'm gone. As far as I know, everyone who was here for the past 3 days is going to be gone, and you will have your forest back. So after that, I proceeded to harvest the footprint. So you saw that procedure in the last part of the video, but at the very, very end of that video, if you happen to go back, right when it pans out or closes out, there is a crow call. And as luck would have it, as soon as the video had been shut off, I heard 2 distinct twig breaks that were over my shoulder, and they were back in the direction of which I had come. I didn't really pay that much mind at the time until I had packed everything up, and as I was walking back up that, the hill towards going back, I noticed that there were 2 evergreen branches that had been broken off of a tree. And what I did was take the time to look at those and realize that those were potentially fresh breaks. In the distance, I had seen what I call tree structures here in Michigan. There was an arch tree, a broken tree, and a bent tree all right in a line. And that could have been circumstantial, but it was just odd that it was right there by the branches that were broken. I did end up smelling the tree, and it was very sappy, and it appeared to be very fresh.
I did not notice these on the way down the hill to the waterfall, but I did hear a couple breaks. These look like they're very, very fresh. I'm going to go try to smell them. But in the back we have a bent, a broken, and a tilted tree. Very, very interesting. So I'm gonna actually, I don't want to deter too much, but I'm gonna go over and smell these, see what that's about.
As I turned around to continue walking, the ground was a heavy moss, and there appeared to me to be a deformation of that mossy area that resembled a footprint. And again, you look through things with rose-colored glasses, you're always going to see things that are rosy. However, this was all circumstantial. I did not get the feeling of dread, but I did get the feeling that I needed to get out of there. So I then proceeded to walk back. I knew that I had about 3/4 of a mile from that point, and I hightailed it. I came around a corner and something dropped me almost to my knees. I felt adrenaline from head to toe. But it was evidently mating season, and I came across a buck getting ready to mount a doe. And they, were quite surprised, but there was the tree rustling and the leaves rustling, and they bolted off in different directions. But having all that in my mind, I was floored with that. Anyway, as I continued to walk back, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that I had a chance to spend the time outdoors, and that I had a chance to have all this experience. And I just look forward to the next adventure. And I hope you guys get a chance to get out and just enjoy nature. But if you need to, pick up some gear and start squatching.